Our team Mapquest, and our project is the roadmap for student success. Now, our team consists of John Burley, our team leader, Daniel Carpenter, the UI design lead, and me, Nick Mertens, and I'm the documentation lead. Our advisor is Dr. Schwing, you all know him, and our client is the roadmap committee, which consists of Elena Nickerson, Daniel Jacobson, and Ian Miller. Now, the layout of our presentation, I'll be taking you through just an overview of what this roadmap really is. Daniel will be going over the design and testing of it, and John will show you what we have so far, and as well as what we're going to be doing in the future. Now, what is the roadmap, and why are we making it? When you first start college, when you're applying, there's a lot of information that you need to know. And all that can get very confusing and almost turn you off to even going to college. And so what this roadmap does is it provides a kind of checklist for a student so they can go on, look at it, and see what they've completed or what they still need to complete. Also, when you're a first-year student, you don't really know what there is on campus. I know when I was starting college, I just went to class and went back to my dorm. Well, the roadmap provides what we're calling points of interest. And what these do is they list out different activities that happen on campus. Say you wanted to join a club, well, you can click on that point of interest, and there's a link that can take you to a list of all the clubs at CW. Or if there's a career fair going on, you can look at that. Now, how we're making this is we're using a Scrum Agile process. We're doing this because this is a new technology. Like, it's never really been done in this way before. And so we need a process that allows us to be flexible in our development and lets us adapt to new requirements as they come. And for version control, we're using a Bitbucket repository with Mercurial. And that would allow us to just stay up and keep updated on what's been going on with the development. Now, some of the requirements, these are just some of the requirements that our client has expressed interest in. First off, they want administrative tools. So, say there's some fair that's never been on campus before, they want to be able to go in and add that to the roadmap. So students can get on there and see, oh, here's this thing. And inversely, they want to say some fair for some reason will no longer be happening. Well, they should be able to go in and delete that so students don't show up to the cert pit and wonder where everyone is. They also want a fluid web page. They don't want the roadmap to be constantly reloading, going to different pages, and just have downtime. And Daniel will kind of take you through how we're solving that problem when he talks about the design. One of the requirements that they've really stressed is they want a way for the students to be able to mark what they've completed so far. So say that student who's just starting college hasn't filled out their FAFSA. When they go to the roadmap, they can look at it, it'll show them, hey, you haven't done this, and so they can fill it out and mark it as complete, so the next time they go on, they'll see, I've done that, I don't even need to think about it. Likewise, it also provides advisors with an easier way to really see what their advisees have done, and really make that whole process easier so advisors don't have to read through a catch report to see what the student still needs. Which leads into the next requirement, which is ease of use. Like most programs, the client wants this to be intuitive and really just obvious in how you use it. Students should be able to look at it for the first time and know what's going on. And we're really programming to that standard. Finally, they want little to no maintenance. All they want to have to do is the administrative stuff, adding and deleting events. And likewise, we're also programming to that. Now, how we're ensuring that what we're making is what the client wants is every 2 weeks we show them a prototype of what we've made, which kind of goes hand in hand with the whole Scrum process, in that if we start to get off track of what they were expecting, they can tell us, hold on, let's go this way. And also, for next quarter, we're going to get together a group of test students who will just give the roadmap and use this, tell us what you think, what you understand, don't understand, or what does or doesn't work. And so that's how we're ensuring quality. Now, with any design, with designing any software, there are some risks. For example, if one of our computers crashes, well, that person just lost everything we've worked on. So we're counteracting that just with the Bitbucket repository. So they can quickly go on, pull the latest version of the code, and get back to work with almost no downtime. Another possible risk is a database overload. So we're using a database to store all the student accounts. And hopefully, this roadmap will be used by thousands of students. So what we'll do to make sure our database can handle that is we will make 1,000 accounts filled with dummy data and see if the database can handle that. And if it can't, well, we'll get a new database, try that, and so on until it works. And finally, a problem of incompatibility. Most of us use Firefox and Chrome, but there are those students who use Opera, Safari, maybe even Internet Explorer. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the roadmap works on all of those, so we aren't potentially leaving out some students. And so what we're going to do to make sure the roadmap is compatible for all browsers is really just test it on those browsers. See if it works, and if it doesn't, find out what doesn't work and fix it. That's the overview of our project, and now I'll hand it over to Daniel to take you through design and testing.
Howdy, I'm Daniel Carpenter, and I'm going to take you through how we're doing this project. You've heard the why, you've heard the what, now you're going to see the how. What we're using to design this website, the student roadmap. So first off, the IDE we're using is Visual Studio 2010. We looked at 2012 a little bit, and there was just some features that didn't want to play nicely with, older features. So we decided to stick with what's on campus on their computers, as well as what we know works. We're using Visual Studio for a couple different reasons, actually. One of the number one reasons is that me and John, actually, have taken the web development courses here at Central. So we are actually very familiar with the Visual Studio IDE in relation to web development. Nick was not part of that class, unfortunately, but he's able to catch up really well, and other classes do use Visual Studio, so it's very familiar. We're very confident in our ability to use Visual Studio as opposed to a different IDE that we have no experience in, such as Eclipse. Another reason we chose Visual Studio is that the different features of Visual Studio are very tailored to this project, making the student roadmap. Features such as IntelliSense, which anyone who's used a programming IDE knows it's very helpful. You can't remember the name of a method, or you can't remember exactly what methods you have available. You start typing and you go through a list that pops up telling you, oh hey, you could make this kind of object, or you have these methods at your disposal. Instead of having to go hunt down the API every time, which can get cumbersome and kind of drag the project down. Another thing we really liked about Visual Studio is the project organization. Nothing's worse than having to hunt down all the folders you've made and find the files for your project to work. And God forbid one of your files was placed in the wrong area and it doesn't load, especially during a presentation. So Visual Studio gets around that by making all of your folders and all of your files, your XML, your HTML, your CSS, in one project file. When you load up your project file, all your folders are there in an Explorer window for you to use. You can manipulate them by dragging and dropping, making new folders, just like you have them on your desktop. So it's super easy and super efficient, and it keeps us from falling into the pit of, where did I put my CSS file? The last two reasons that we really like Visual Studio is the database and the development web server that were bundled with it. The database is a SQL Express database, and it comes bundled with our Visual Studio 2010. So first of all, we don't have to hunt down a database to use. Of course, this is all depending on whether or not it will hold 1,000 or more student datas. If it doesn't, we might have to find a new one. But for right now, it's very useful for building a prototype, getting it working, and making sure that the functionality is there. The other thing we like is the integrated web server, which means that we don't have to put it onto a server in order to run the website. In fact, the great thing is I don't even need internet access to test my website. I can load up this internet server, and it'll display it in any internet browser I choose as if it were connected to a web page. Then we can test it, make sure it works without the need of having to update it to a server. Another tool we like that we're using is the ASP.NET framework, which is included in Visual Studio, so another plus for the last one. ASP.NET has a couple things going for it that we really like. First of all, it has its own login system built into it. Visual Studio has a wizard that will guide you through how to set up a login system in ASP.NET. You can set up the roles, you can set up the different accesses and permissions so that you don't have people who don't have the right permission getting into your database and having all sorts of crude data that you don't want to display on your web page for the world to see. The other thing we like are the ASP.NET controls, and this goes back to our database. The ASP.NET controls can be used as HTML elements, such as buttons or list items, but the great thing about them is that they use C# code as a backend. Now, using the C# code as a backend for our buttons lets us access our database of student data directly. That means that a student can click on an ASP.NET button, and that will access our database to that student's user account and let that user account be updated so that the button was clicked. So say they want to show that they've done their FAFSA. They click on the button that says, completed. It accesses that database with C# code instead of having to find a workaround for it. Finally, in order to ensure that fluidity, that motion of the web page, without having it jarring with refreshes or downtime, we're using Ajax, which isn't its own programming language, as most of you probably know, but is instead a set of techniques using JavaScript and XML. So first off, our JavaScript, which we use to do all the different effects and make sure that our page isn't just going to separate pages and reloading. We're using the jQuery library for all sorts of different effects in order to make the web page seem seamless and also very modern and up to date so that people will enjoy using it and not just get frustrated. Our jQuery can do all sorts of things, like animate buttons when you hover over them. We have a jQuery effect that will make the buttons move in and out, or give some sort of indication that you're hovering over a button. Another thing our jQuery does is it parses our XML data, which is where we're storing all the information for like the career fairs and the student clubs and all the information. That way, our jQuery can just go in, parse out the data from our file, and populate it where we need it. Otherwise, we would have to use another type of code, such as C# to go through, which can sometimes get cumbersome when it comes to XML data. There's really long method names, and it's just not too intuitive. So that's what we're using to make the project. How are we ensuring that this project stays on track and works? We don't want to ship a broken product. That's where our testing comes in. Now, as opposed to using a testing suite or like a unit test such as JUnit, we're using what we like to call dynamic testing. Our project is really set up for this because instead of making a bunch of methods and classes and then running test units for all of them at once, we really need to find out if something works right away and fix it, because even though if part of your JavaScript code isn't compiling or working right, the whole web page goes down. So what we've been doing is, in our website, we create small modules of functionality, such as make a button that takes me to the next page, or clicking on something should populate a panel with data. As soon as we program this, we test it right away on the spot. And if it doesn't work, we spend our time going in and fixing that until it works exactly in all use cases. Some people might find this inefficient. They might say that it's better to use software in order to test your product. But for our project, which is kind of smaller and very specific in functionality, this has really helped us to stop the project from slowing down and get us to where we are at right now. Another type of testing that we're going to be implementing, and we already have a little bit, Nick covered this in his talk, is black box and acceptance testing. Next quarter, we will get that group of students who have never used this product and don't know anything about how it's been made, just to give it a test run. They'll go through it, and then they'll let us know what they thought of it. We'll be watching them, seeing if they have problems getting to one area or another, or if they're confused on what to do next. The acceptance testing portion is done by our clients every 2 weeks. When we show them the product, they look at it, go through it, and we get feedback. We just have a meeting on what's good, what's bad, what needs to change. Oh, hey, I thought of this, let's add that to it. And it's really been effective in keeping our project on task and making sure that we get them what they want. Well, I could ramble on and continue to tell you about how our project works and all the methods, but I see some of you are falling asleep already. So instead, I'm going to turn it over to our team lead to give you a live demo of the project.
Yeah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jonathan Burley, and I'll be going through the live demo of what we have so far. So first off, I'm going to log in. And it's important to note that we have separate roles set up in our database for, say, the admin, we have an advisor, and a student. Now, if you're logged as an admin, you will be able to see this admin button that will take you to the admin page, and you can do all that functionality there. If you're a student, you wouldn't see this. If you're an advisor, you'd go to the advisor section. And this also allows us to actively deny any users from going, say, if you're a student, you wouldn't be allowed to go and just type in the URL for the admin page. It would boot you back to the login. So this is the first screen that the student sees, and you'll be able to select which quarter you want information for. These awesome bouncing effects. Okay, so say I'm a student, I've gotten accepted into Central, but it's not yet fall quarter. So the pre-quarter, summer quarter, let's go ahead and click on that, and we'll be greeted with this main screen that the students will be able to use for the main functionality of our project. So first off, each of these has tooltips that we've attached via jQuery. And it's also important to note that all of what you see here was loaded into the page, the XML was parsed, as soon as you logged in. So it's all ready to go. This is part of the fluidity that Daniel had been talking about. We're using Ajax to make it all happen while remaining on the index page. So say I want to know more about admissions. I'll click on that. And here we see that we have all the information on it and resources that you can click. And if I want to know how to apply, I can click that and it'll load it. This is all done as escape HTML in the XML document that's parsed as HTML once it's loaded onto the page. So it can display as not text, but as actual HTML links. So all these panels are important information that our clients want the students to know for their college career. These are pretty necessary things like financial aid, Wildcat Day, orientation. I mean, you want to go to orientation. It's pretty important. Important things to notice is that some of these don't have extra panels, but this one and this one, they do. These are extra things that are also important relating to orientation and admissions. So you can click this, you could click the housing need if you want to know more about that. And that also repopulates the page based on the content for that particular panel. And the CSS keeps track of what you've selected so far. Now I'm going to go back to the quarters and say we're now in fall quarter. Now we have various other things that will be shown based on which quarter you pick. It's all dynamic. This is all done in the XML. Kind of thing with like for loop. It just goes through, picks out per quarter, and shoves out whatever was in XML into the HTML. And if, say, the client wants to add another panel, all they have to do is just use an admin tool, add another panel, and the website's smart enough to know where to put it and what data is there, and just display it to the user. Next up, we have points of interest. These aren't really important enough for the college career for, completing all of what you want for college, but it's relevant to your college experience. So you click on any of these, you select whatever else you had, and it'll show you information about these. Say I want to attend a career fair, like Nick said, we have a link for that. We can just click it and it'll show us all of the career stuff. And now I will go ahead and we'll go ahead and show you what a use case, say, for a student would be. So say we have a student and he just got accepted to Central, summer quarter, and he wants to know about financial aid. Come on, student. Let's see you do your work.
Financial, oh, there's financial.
You just found financial aid. It's pretty apparent where that is.
Okay. Oh, there are loans, grants. FAFSA.
Yeah, what's
What's
FAFSA?
FAFSA? Free fair? Oh, I should do that.
There you go.
That's important.
Justin. All right. So that was a use case for a typical student. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to transition to what's next. So here's what we're going to be doing in the winter quarter is we're going to be tying all of this data to the student account. So right now, the student can go in, they can see the data, but it doesn't really show them what they've done. As we've discussed earlier, we want them to be able to visually see what they have and haven't done. So say they click on financial aid, all right, well, the student's finished with their FAFSA. They can check it off. We're going to have a button for that. And once they do that, we will store in the database that they've done that, and we can change the gradient of the button to green or put a stripe on it, just so they know that they've done it. And then in the quarter main screen that displays the quarters, we'll have a general overview of what has been completed, like say 3 out of 4 in the summer quarter have been done. We got 1 outstanding item. Also, we're going to finish up the admin tools. We don't quite have this implemented yet, but we've started designing it. So they'll be able to add, remove panels, modify existing ones, and so forth, and also go into the users and designate roles to them. Say we want this person to be an advisor. We can do that from the admin tool, but we don't want an advisor designate himself as admin and so forth. So just the admins get to do that stuff. Also, the advisor page. When an advisor logs in, they'll go to their page and they'll be able to select a student and see what they have and haven't done yet. So say a student goes to an advisor, they don't have to ask them all the questions. They'll just ask them, all right, well, let's go ahead and look at your roadmap. And it'll be able to give them a more informed way of providing useful information to the students that go to them. If there's time at the end, after we finish all the main functional requirements, we're going to add in major-specific information into our system. So say the student can type in their major that they've chosen, and it'll provide them more information based on what they've put in. Last but not least, we're going to polish up what we have. We have a really good framework going, but maybe some things need tweaking, maybe some code needs to be reworked a little bit later on once we implement more features. So that's what we'll be doing. Any questions?
So, this doesn't interact with Safari, right?
No.
So, how do you find out if they've done FAFSA and who their advisor is and all that stuff?
They're going, if they've done FAFSA, they will check it off. It's just kind of like a to-do list, to say. So they go in, they say, all right, well, here's FAFSA. All right, what do I need to do? And then once they've done it, they can check it off, and then they'll know that they've done it. If they go to their advisor, the advisor can just log in, and they'll be able to pull up the student file and see if they've done it or not. So it's
So
not...
how does the connection occur between the student and the advisor?
The advisors have their own account. They don't have to be assigned to the student per se. Any advisor can see the students. So they're not directly linked.
So you can see any student?
Yeah, I mean, what if I want to go see an advisor, my advisor, but he's not available? I make an appointment for another advisor. I'll be able to do that. He'll still be able to see my file and help me.
I had another question about the stress testing of the database. seems like 1,000 is actually a tiny number
It does.
to me.
That was just an arbitrary number.
I mean, you know, we're dealing in one term with 10 or 15,000 students potentially using this.
Then we'll put
And
15,000
then-
students in there.
Yeah, and then each year, some come in, some new ones come in, some leave. Stress that I would recommend to be more than just 1,000.
Of course. I'm sure there'll also be an administrative function that will prune the database after every 4 years or so that way it doesn't build up with thousands and thousands of accounts over 10 years. Assuming we're still running that long. Any other questions? Of course.
So students, each student brings with him or her to the university a certain set of expectations. Have you considered the fact that all these things that you're providing on this page, maybe only 60% of the students would be interested in, whereas the other 40% are interested in something else? That's a simplified version. In reality, there are 30 different types of students. Each of them want to see something else. So how will you make sure that the information that the student is seeing is relevant for them? And some of these are simple things, male, female as well. There are different things that you know.
To answer that question, we had to talk with actually our client to see what they were expecting to put in there and why they wanted it. Our client is directly responsible for the type of information that goes in there, as well as when to take stuff out and exactly how much to tell these different students. Instead of tailor making it for each of these individual students, whereas, it would take quite a long time, you would have to get quite a lot of different data, and even then you still might leave some out. Our client wants us to actually just go for the broad, general variety of things that many people could be interested in. So instead of showing a list of clubs on our website, we just suggest join a club. Here's a list of the ones you might be interested in. Here's all the clubs on campus. It's not so much a specific, you should do this and you should do that, but instead it's trying to go for the broad overview to get students interested in these specific areas. So whereas we might not be able to get, 40%, we might only get 6% or 60% on one particular panel with joining a club. Maybe they see something else they like further down the points of interest. So it's just more of an all-inclusive thing instead of trying to label everybody and hit their specific interests.
Sure, there's a point of interest. It's not necessary. There's some important things. Those are the main panels. But points of interest are just things that you might be interested in. Here's some information for it in case you are.
Yeah, the main goal was to make sure that the users, the students, know what they need to do in order to complete college.
Could you talk more about your planned test group? Who's going to do that? Who is it you are the client?
The test group as in?
Oh, the students.
Of the students. We just talked to our advisor, or our client, and she said that in the winter quarter we will get a group of students that can go through and test out what we have, and we'll be able to observe them and give them a sort of survey to see what worked well, what didn't work well, but they'll be providing us with test groups of actual students to see how this works. And a real scenario.
I'd like to quote our client in saying, she has many students at her disposal.
You're also a bit vague about the database. Like what database are you planning to use?
Right now we're pretty set on the built-in SQL Express that's with Visual Studio. It integrates really well with ASP.NET.
Express.
Yes.
All right.
I believe it's like 10.1, something like that.
Okay. So it's an actual database as opposed to a file database?
Yes, it's an actual database, and we're using ASP.NET DB to handle all the users.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.